Hello, everyone. Any web novel readers, YouTube video trawlers, people interested in web novels, or first-time readers, and just visitors in general. This is going to be my first web novel summary on this channel, temporarily known as Drifting, and possibly in the future, web novel analyst and reviewer, abbreviated to WAR. And hopefully, my first web novel analysis and subsequent analyses will follow shortly behind this video. However, looking at like how long this original audio was technically supposed to last, around 2 hours, that might take a little bit. So yeah, I really intend to make this a weekly thing. That's the goal. So yeah, when I do get that up and running, that's going to be quite cool. So when I first started reading the story, I knew I had something amazing on my hands. And the reason why I knew that is because the way that the author wrote the material, the topic he chose was just different than anything else. And I was just as excited when I started preparing this because I knew I would be able to share with everyone an amazing story. Now, before I get into the book, so with that tangent out of the way, let's talk about the story. Now, the story I've chosen to share with everyone is called Tomorrow Has Not Arrived, or Tomorrow Hasn't Arrived, which is abbreviated to THA, as most web novels are. And that's my personal translation on the novel. The best machine translation that I've come across is Tomorrow Is Not Here. TISH is what it's abbreviated to. Tish, which is easier to say, but I prefer my own translation. Now, really briefly, the other machine translations could also be translated as Tomorrow Is Not Coming, Tomorrow Is Not Close, or Nearby. And all these translations come from the 4 original Chinese characters, the original title, which is Ming Er Wei Ling, right? And just to give a quick breakdown of that title, because I am going to do a quick analysis of that. The first Chinese character is Ming, right? And Ming generally means smart or tomorrow. And to understand what it means, the meaning of it, we have to really look at the next character, real quickly. Yeah, Ming, I think is the first accent. Is the 4th accent in Chinese, I think. Just guess. Really quickly, though. Generally means sun or pertaining to sun. It can also pertain to calendars, a calendar day, or just a day in general, or a date, right? But how we know is that when used in conjunction with Ming, Ming'er means tomorrow. And then we have the other 2 terms, Wei. Wei by itself generally means future, like 未来. That's generally how it's used. But a grammatical term, it generally means has not or hasn't. And in this context, hasn't really applies to the following term, or haven't, I guess, as well. Ling, that's the following term is ling, and ling generally means coming on its own. It's commonly seen in the phrase 欢迎光临, which is a welcoming greeting that's used in Chinese. This phrase is used in Chinese stores, shops, restaurants, and businesses. It's really a common greeting used for customers. When they step in the door, you'll often hear 欢迎光临. That's how they welcome customers. And so this title, Ming Er Wei Ling, translates to Tomorrow Has Not Arrived. And so now we're going to start getting into the background information. It's more timestamps and just future stuff. The book has around 5 volumes and an epilogue, which totals to around 1.8 million Chinese characters. I rounded up, of course. It's not as intimidating as it is. I'll give you some context in a little bit, but a little more background information. I like to say it's around 1.78. That's just the way I read it. But on the site, it's actually 1.718 million Chinese characters. So it's closer to 1.7, but I always often leave out the 1 and just say 1.78. And just some context on that number 1.8. It sounds intimidating, but really, this is not even like some of the longer ones. Generally, you'll see a lot of novels being 2 million characters and up. That's like an actual search category on the site. There are books, there's search terms for between, like, I think 100,000 or half a million to a million, and then the next level up would be 2 million, right? So 2 million, this is below that number, below the threshold of 2 million. So above 2 million, they're not rare, but they're not like super common either. They're not like dime a dozen. So there are quite a few books above this length, and this is considered a decently sized book, but definitely not out of the norm and not super long. So it is definitely readable, and I'll get more into the context about length later. But for now, just some references that would be similar to would be the Harry Potter series by J.K. Rowling. Now, that book has 7, I think maybe even 8, which is like the Hidden or Destiny's Child to play, but it definitely feels much shorter, and because Harry Potter's is 7 and this is 5, and it's probably much shorter than Harry Potter, but I just wanted to give everyone just some sort of reference. And another series that you might compare it to would be, in terms of length, would be The Song of Ice and Fire, also popularized by Game of Thrones, by George R.R. Martin. Now, just a quick side note. At first, I wasn't sure that was the title and series of the books. I've just heard it in passing, both George R.R. Martin, Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, and whatnot. So I went back to do research, and I was pleased to find that I was correct. Now, here's where it's a little controversial, but to be honest, I'm just gonna lay this out there. I haven't read either series. I'm a web novel person through and through. So although I've had an interest in fantasy, I've gone through some anime and manga. In terms of all these, I haven't really engaged with the community or really went that deep. And that's why I decided to keep my niche, or at least for now, start with web novels before I even go into those topics. So yeah, I might get burned by the book reading community, but if that's what it is, so be it. Now, personally, my personal opinion is the length of the story is closer to the length of one book in particular, the length of Crime and Punishment. Now, it's not that much of a slog, but around that 300, I think, to 500 page range, that's about what it is. And you can even compare the way it's published to the way Crime and Punishment was published, which is chapter by chapter. Very similar way of reading and how to read it. Now I'm going to start a little tangent, actually, after this. So it's hosted on Qidian, like most good novels. And here's where the tangent starts. The story, the author's timestamp as well. So back to the story. The author started writing this around 2019. I guess I'd gander around early 2019, although it could be like the fall of 2019. And he finished quite recently at time of writing, which is the 1st of July of 2020. Now, just future-proofing, and so people can have some context, this is really during the pandemic season. The pandemic, I think, starts around September or October in China and Asia, and then it isn't until around early 2020 that it really starts to spread towards Western countries. Now, the rub is, I don't know whether he chose to write it during the pandemic, or if he planned to write it during the pandemic, or if he just started writing and then it just happened to be a good time. But for whatever the reason, I felt like he chose a really good time to write it, because one of the things is the topics he captures a lot of cultural influences and important events and problems at this current moment in time, and just during this decade as well, or that decade. He does. I don't think, in my personal opinion, in analysis, I don't think he goes into the pandemic, but he does draw upon current cultural events, problems, and cultural figures, and he combines all this to turn it into an amazing story. He even goes into some anime and references as well, and which I think is quite cool. I think it was a great move on his part, just because it's one of the best times for people to read his work and for him to write it. As I said, I don't know if he planned it, but or intention, or it would just happen to be. But my personal opinion is just right place, right time. Not necessarily good fortune. I don't like to call it good luck, but just good timing. And so, just more on the book altogether as a whole. I mentioned before, I get into the context of it, and here's of the length. Altogether, the book and the story comes out to 768 chapters, including author testimonials. Now, 768, what does that mean? Well, in context, right, at the very low level, the short web novels will go from between 500 to 100 chapters. Now, this would be like a novella size, like a chapter level book, like one of the first chapter books a kid might read, of web novels at least. These are your love stories. A lot of first time writers, like this would be like children's authors and whatnot, but love stories and first time writers write at this level. Their quality is still quite good. I find short novels are always good novels, because even though they're short, they're quality, right? These are first time writers, love stories, and dramas. Then you have the next level up, which is Korean level novels. I like to call it Korean, but we'll just call it 300 mark or threshold. Now, a lot of 300 chapter novels, I call them Korean level novels, is because that's at the length at which a lot of the Korean translations have been at. Although possibly Arena, Seoul Station Necromancer, which is very similar to Apocalypse Cockroach. I'm pretty sure Apocalypse Cockroach is Chinese, and Seoul Station Necromancer is Korean. A lot of those Korean novels and translations have been around 300. I've read one at 150 and 300. They might even go to like 400, 500. But at the moment, most of them stay around 300. They do get longer. A lot of these novels, because they're short, they generally are quality, right? There are some without that, but a lot of the Korean translations turn out to be quality. I may get into more of the genre and whatnot later, but as I said, separate video, not at the moment. Now we get to some of the major thresholds of 500. I'm really going to skip around to 800 actually, because a lot of experienced web novel readers have a standard of how long they want the length of their book to be. Because if someone's starting to write it and they only have 50 chapters, it's really frustrating to have to wait week by week or even day by day if people are publishing daily. So like 100, under 100 is some people's threshold, especially for some first-time readers and even English readers, like just pure English readers. Some and a lot of the Western web novels, especially on Royal Road Legends, only reach up to like 200. I say only 200 is an impressive number, but in comparison to the length of Chinese web novels, they go much further, more depth. Now, some experienced Chinese web novel readers, or even web novel readers in general, will start to reach 500, 800, 1,000, 2,000. But my threshold recently is around 800 to 1,000, and so that's what I'm comparing it based on. But yeah, shorter than 800, they won't read anything shorter than 800. Above 800, you start to get to what I like to categorize Wuxia or Wuxia novels. These are the martial arts novels, Eastern fantasy, cultivation, and even some fanfics reach this level because you get to a certain point. I go actually I'll do that in a little bit. But yeah, around that threshold, it'd be like 500, 800, 1,000. That's around this level, and that's the length. And this story is obviously shorter than that. If I didn't mention before, this is a short tangent as well. So yeah, I've seen books that go another threshold would be that 2,000 chapter mark. If you could hit 2,000, that's a special mark as well. I think I've possibly read one or two 22,000 chapter books. I don't know if I finished it though. I know I've read ones that have gone that long, but I don't know if I could get that far. I've definitely read a couple, and even read to the point. I think a 1351, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. I've read a couple of those, a handful, of course, but I've read a couple. I'm not going to mention it here, but maybe in the future I'll go into some of those. So yeah, I'm trying to think off the top of the head if I missed anything. So, in comparison, back to the point, 1.8 million, that 1.78 million of this book is really nothing to scoff at, right? It's still decently sized. But as I said before, 2 million is quite common, and then this is not like super long. It's definitely not a book that you might want to first read. There's a reason why I did this. I did a debut summary on this one, but I think it's a good intermediary level novel, especially if you're maybe not the first one to get into. It could be a good one to start to get into if you're starting to read the machine translations or just trying to read raw ones. But this it is quite long, but still great though. It's not as long as some of the longer ones. 800 chapters, right? So yeah, that really concludes this short tangent, and now I'm going to get into the author of the story. Now, the author of this story is it's written by the Chinese name is Reng Qiuming. Now, getting into the English translation, my Chinese proficiency is not the best. Okay, so I use a lot of machine translations like Baidu, Bing. Sorry, I think I forgot to mention Yahoo and Flickr. I don't know why that comes to mind. But yeah, so Bing, Google Translate, Baidu 翻译. Those are the machine translations I use. Because my Chinese proficiency is not the highest, so I'm really guessing on most of these. So if I do get something wrong in terms of Chinese translation, put in the comments. I'd love to read that because kind of want to improve Chinese proficiency. Full name, his pen name at least, Reng. I guess by the character on the left, which is called a danreng pao. Two strokes generally has to do with people, descended from the Chinese character Reng. Now, what that means, what that means is it has something to do with people or persons. And my guess would be it means to recognize, like to recognize someone. I couldn't find any information that confirmed it, but that's what I guessed. Chill is something I'm a little more familiar with. It's autumn or fall. I can say quite I can I can find evidence, and I could say quite confidently chill means autumn or fall, that season of the year. Now Ming is a little bit more difficult. When I put it into the machine, I didn't get anything out. It's just one of those names that just like don't necessarily mean anything, like John. By themselves, they don't really mean anything. But in terms of context, what the machine translation gave out, especially I think this is from Baidu, I got the translation autumn drizzle. Now, um, yeah, if anyone could come with a better translation, that'd be great. But for now, I'm just going to go with autumn drizzle. Now, if you're interested in this work, you might want to check out some of his previous works. And he wrote previously. He wrote works like, and the English translated titles, machine translated, of course. But I can kind of confirm is This Assassin Has a Problem and Magic Punk. Now, originally I wanted to not learn the Chinese name and pronunciations because that would take a while. Which was my original guess would be 这杀手有个问题 and 魔术少年, right? And then I wasn't even gonna guess on the last work that he did. But looking at the titles, they're actually not that difficult to read, which is This Assassin Has a Problem. The original title is 这个刺客有毛病. And then Magic Punk, the original title is 魔术朋克. Now, I don't want to really break it down too in depth, but I'll just do really briefly. 这个 means this, 这 is this, and then 个 is generally a measure word or is. 死客 has to do with assassin. 死 kind of sounds like kill or die. And then 客 I think is thing, but 死客 is just a conjunction word that sticks together. This means assassin. 有 means to have, and then 毛病 generally means sick. Most people say 毛病 in the context of mentally sick, translated to problem, of course. Because 病, that term generally has to do with sick in general, and then 毛 means something's wrong. 毛病 together generally means mentally sick, but problem fits quite well. Now, Magic Punk, 魔术朋克, right? 魔术, those two are conjunction terms. 魔 generally has to do with mysticism, right? Some sort of that fantasy. And then 术, I guess those are conjunction to mean magic. Now, 术, that word is interesting because by itself, it is a homophone for 法, which is like law, 法律, 法学, that type of stuff. And then 朋克, it's an interesting term because 朋, the two moons generally mean friend or 朋友. So that's 朋. And then 克 is a homophone or just an onomatopoeia or just one of those audio sounding words that just sound similar. 克, right? Like you can hear it in 夹克, or which is jack or jacket, which is Jacque, however you pronounce that French word. But 魔术朋克 translates to magic punk. And strangely enough, it reminded me of the anime Desert Punk. And he's currently working on a title called Sky Shroud Invasion. I wasn't even going to give my best guess at this because, yeah, I'm not getting that. But the translation is 天围入侵. I'm not analyzing that. I don't understand the terms, too difficult. But yeah, that's his current work. And yeah, if you really like the story, go check out some of his previous works. Those might be some ideas that you might want to look into. And yeah,